Hey, there we go. Welcome back. The Leonis Report, episode 47. Happy to be here. Just real quickly before we hop into things, I apologize, but I don't apologize. I just got off a plane like an hour and a half ago, just straight off from Mexico. So figured keep the attire rolling. Yes, I look red. Sorry to rub it in your face, JB, and all that. Had this nice getaway, but certainly nice to be back for now. How you doing, man?
You know how it is, just toiling away, working every day, taking care of the family, the usual.
The usual. It's okay. We got War Divisions for our fun in between.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, we got a lot to cover today. Obviously, primarily centered around Final Fantasy 13 and its rerun. We will start off just going over the itinerary, if you will, a little bit about Hope and Snow and Lightning, some of the upgrades they got, some of the new equipment upgrades. Fang is really going to be a big piece of the conversation here, and just every way we can analyze it: Pierce units, Lightning units, meta units, whatever the case may be. We do have some content related things here with looking at Helena in terms of her drop from the top 25, and we'll kind of examine some of that. We have quick pick returning and limited guild wars, so kind of look at the map and some of the items there. But the last thing here is looking at Volke, who we do have some limited info on, but enough info that we can obviously make some quick hit decisions, at least more than we could a couple days ago. And then finally, some really good Q&A here. A lot of them centered on the tier list we did before, but we also just have some really good questions. And so that's the lineup of things. So sit back, hopefully, get ready, everybody. But for now, Final Fantasy 13, we'll start off with the unit upgrades here that Hope, Snow, and Lightning are notably getting limit break upgrades. So we can go through these if you, I don't know if you've looked at these much already yet.
I've looked at them a little bit. Obviously, these guys got their MA2s when they did kind of the full Final Fantasy rerun. I guess back in the fall for us last year. Now we're getting the limit burst upgrades. Hope is actually getting another sort of very nice upgrade for him. He's finally getting his job group. He was the last one to kind of get placed. He's getting added into the glove group, which it's a good placement for him. I don't. Did he already have the ability to equip gloves? I don't
No,
think that he did.
it was only
So
Boomerang. Yeah, I love that move for him. I mean, I know we were just talking about it the other day in terms of like some of these underdeveloped classes from like a job VC, and Book is notably one of them. But even Glove kind of came up in the convo. And to me, Glove units are really like these like quirky, weird chess pieces that if you look at a bunch of the Glove units, they're just kind of weird. Like, actually, this might be a good segue just to like bring it up. And this isn't all of them, obviously, but like Kefka has some shenanigans with like the hate generation, what he does to like pass on hate to someone else. Obviously, Addison Ray's not here. I'm sorry, because we're on JP. Addison Ray, obviously, with her whole like courage and heal back. Renault is kind of an oddity, is that like double haster, but I say she's more than just a Velas because there's a whole bunch of extra things she can do. Zoma obviously does a bunch of odd things. So I think Hope being in the glove group makes a lot of sense that he has some oddities.
yeah, they're like a mix of support and damage kind of in one, and he definitely fits that. That was kind of what they were going for him with kind of the time mage sub job. It's got red mage in there as well. But the limit burst upgrade, it's getting that elemental chain resistance decrease by 40. That's kind of whatever. I mean, this is a 3-hit attack, so maybe there's a little bit something to that, kind of ramp up the damage a little bit. He gets the magic increase. That one he already did have before.
Yep.
It is becoming a guaranteed hit for him, which is super nice because his accuracy is atrocious.
Awful.
He does get the reduced damage taken for 3 times. That should just be a standard barrier. Is a general barrier though, which is nice.
Yep.
And then he's getting a debuff onto the targets. This is one that we just saw recently with Shadow Links. 20% physical and magical reduction. There is a range increase there as well. He's getting a pretty long range on
Pretty
this
long
now.
range.
So
I love this. I think this is great for him. Where Hope's always been like surprisingly, I think, tankier than most people like to admit. But a lot of it was AOE resistance oriented, which has kind of taken a step back. So that damage reduction, every little bit helps. To be honest, 20% reduced isn't insignificant. That's a pretty nice debuff. Obviously, it's only a cross shape, so debatable how many people he ends up hitting with it. I do think the elemental chainers, I like the upside here for mono light teams, where I know light tends to accumulate chains maybe a little bit faster than some other elements do. I know Starlight Helena forever was like notoriously a big multi-chainer. But even now, like I know there's still a fair amount of hits. And to your point, him starting the chain or finishing the chain obviously can do a lot for that. I think it's a great limit break upgrade.
Yeah, this is definitely nice. It gives him another kind of attack to the repertoire, another long range attack. The kind of tricky thing with him has definitely been wrangling in his AI a little bit. Like he's got some different things that he is an attack centric AI, but he has all these nice buffs that you would like him to use. So you got to kind of pick and choose what you want to toggle on and off to kind of get him dialed in correctly. But he does still have a kind of a couple of nice buffs. He still has that physical magical damage. That one, of course, isn't quite as good as it used to be, or at least as unique as it used to be.
Right.
But still pretty nice. And yeah, I'm interested in kind of trying him out. I don't think that he's a joke character anymore, especially kind of officially getting it added into Glove, like we mentioned. So yeah, this is nice for a free unit.
Definitely. His magic stat, I remember, has always gotten abnormally high. I think he was easily hitting 2K and many of my light teams above and beyond what most normal magic units get up to. But I agree, the AI is absolutely awful. I remember I had some real copium when he got his MA2 upgrade that, you look at it on paper and there's nothing here not to like. A lot of it's great. The priority of what he decides to cast, though, is out of order, in my opinion, in terms of what's the best buff to cast, and a couple of these have the cast time associated with it, which make it near impossible to really like line up perfectly. That I think even this first buff you're seeing here, the slash and magic res of 30% and the decrease hate, like that's another one that's got cast time on it. So is in this AoE res buff. It just makes things very difficult to actually line up. And so I've been burned enough by this unit that I'm not going to hype him up too much, but it's a nice limit break upgrade. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I think to get those to work correctly, you do need to utilize both of his cast time passives, so he can get the 650 non-activation time,
Yep.
which should one tick those spells.
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, you do need to line up the agility even with a one tick sometimes. Yeah, if it's going to be like at the beginning of battle, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's definitely going to take some playing with.
Definitely. But yeah, we'll obviously see how things come to fruition with him. And Snow is a unit that I think desperately needs a limit break upgrade because he's got some good upgrades. I don't think anything that really has pushed him over the cliff. I know we had some hopes with these upgrades, but if you recall, these came really late at the tail end of the road to worldwide. So I think by the time we got these upgrades, a lot of the power creep had come in that these units never really saw the uptick that many of us were really hoping for. His limit break, though, just to recap this one again, another one that's totally changing its shape, going from that very, 2 square, very limiting range to this larger square shaped AoE. Nice AP cost reduction as well, which I know is a great thing for him. Where a lot of times you would turn the limit break off just because it was far more impactful to use his main kit things instead. But now you're getting at least an AoE strike in peril of 38%. That percentage is certainly no joke. You're retaining the chance to inflict stun, but he's also getting regen for himself here, number one, and he's getting the decreased AP consumption. So on that topic of AP issues, this does also kind of solve it. Then again, it's very short range, so he might already be low on AP by the time that occurs, but I love the regen aspect. He's got enough healing power. I know at least on his MA2, I think it was, or his 140, that regen in conjunction with his own self-healing is certainly going to be very nice.
Yeah, I mean, he's got 30 base, and then you can add in 20 from trust stones, so he can get 50, which is no joke. I mean, that's gonna increase that substantially in terms of the region. I wish that it was 20%. Like they really haven't given that out too often. I think more the merrier is one of the few that has it, but doesn't really have the HP pool to cash in on it.
Yep.
I do think this is a really, really nice upgrade, though. Like it enables the strike team with the AoE 38% strike in peril. We haven't seen a strike in peril on this big of an AoE yet in the game, which is super nice. Obviously, you still get the stun, which was always nice about it before. And this is also protecting his courage, which, that was one big problem we had with his survivability.
Oh,
So
yes.
anybody he hits with this, he's he's essentially they're blocking their ability to remove his courage, which is super nice.
That is super nice. On paper, I don't think there's any way to improve it. I'm still skeptical in practice, though, just because of the range of this, where you talk about 3 squares away. A lot of these courage removal characters will outrange him typically, and him being a tank, he will likely be the frontline unit. So I think the opportunities to protect the courage are a little more limiting, but to have it there still, there are going to be times where it comes in very clutch.
One thing that I don't quite understand about this wording is if he's actually debuffing the courage removal, or if he's just straight up ignoring if somebody does remove it. Are you kind of reading that the same way?
I am, and
Like
I've given up on votive stats at this point too. I really have. Like, there's been so many translation issues that like I don't even think too much of it.
yeah. Either way, I think that's like a nice improvement for her survivability. Because he does have that big heal back that he can proc off to when he gets low. So
Definitely. And it's when he gets very low, it's less than 20% health. And this used to be a lot more consistent back when there wasn't as much courage removal. So you'd easily get him to courage, which obviously would proc this effect. But if you have so much courage removal in the game, for him to perfectly hit that 20% threshold was far more inconsistent than ever. So there'd often be times where someone might have removed the courage and then just flat out killed him. And he never got to restore this HP because of it.
yeah, definitely.
But that brings us to the third unit, which is Lightning, who I think probably has seen the most uptick in usage of the 3 units. And obviously a lot of that is just like Lightning Element related, where all of those units have done relatively well. Hers is getting, I think, the Zidane treatment, where this is that crit damage resistance. I think this is the same kind of mechanic. We've seen this to be noteworthy enough. I don't think it's amazing, but it's enough. It's definitely amplified damage. She's also getting the increased CT of 250 for when performing a critical hit, which I think is just for this attack. I don't think it's a lingering effect based on how I'm reading this. And the AP reduction from 43 to 33. I like this. Lightning's kit overall is in a pretty decent spot. That I don't think the limit break needed a ton of over tuning, but yeah.
No, I mean it was already like a pretty solid limit burst to begin with the Imperil on there and getting the self buff for the slash res pen. I remember testing this with Zidane, this new mechanic for the crit damage resistance. If I remember correctly, it was like the 20% there was essentially taking, like, if you have a 25 crit damage mod, it would take it to 30. I think that's what I remember. It's it's been
It's
a
been
few
so
months
long.
since Zidane came out, and I only tested it just once or twice. So it's something in that ballpark. Essentially, it's very minor, but
But
it is a damage increase.
I do remember being more than we thought it was, though. I think we did the math on it because I think our gut was that it was just a small crit damage mod increase. And I feel like I remember being a little bit surprised about how much more damage it actually was. So this is probably a good time to reevaluate that. I know we're kind of the subject matter experts on game
To go back
mechanics.
to that conversation, yeah.
Definitely do. The one thing that I do, I think, downside of this is the fact that it's just a single target oriented ability. But this to me is really her upside for maybe being able to tank bust, which, this unit's always been really good at the amount of slash res pen that she can get to, where she's got that 40 on the limit break. Not in JP, but for us, the Esther Vision card has really thrown fuel on the fire for how much slash res pen, but also the defense pen where she's got the 40 and daily. Obviously, can get a few different other ways. So she's on the Dark Ifrit card as a lightning unit. The defense pen is on this large AoE ability, which she does prefer. So when I see this limit break, to me, it's like, okay, you're taking a tank and you're already at these high levels of slash res pen and defense pen. You're adding a crit damage imperil of sorts, and then the lightning imperil, and then the increase CT is just kind of like, I don't know, keeping her active.
Yeah, it gets her next turnaround just a little bit quicker. So
Yeah.
yeah, like you said, I think that this character was probably in the most usable spot of the three before this upgrade. So it's just a little cherry on top. Makes her a little bit better. Not a meta unit, but usable.
Yeah, definitely. We do have some other equipment upgrades that are obviously coming along with these units. I'm going to hold off real quickly on Fangs because I do want to just go through, I think, the same order of units that we saw.
Yeah, there's no weapon for snow. This one is just randomly getting upgraded as well.
Oh, okay. All right, that makes sense. The first one here is for Hope. It's the Air Wing, where His formerly was getting. Shoot, I don't even know.
Just had the Majora's pen.
Oh, I like this. Okay. So formerly, this weapon was just the magic res pen of 20. It's getting a couple effects here. One of them is the increase in AoE res when his HP is above 50%. He's already been a very high AoE res unit, so that kind of leans into that. I like the second one, though, that once the HP falls below 80%, very easy to do. That's basically just one hit, that he'll get a minus hate of 5. I genuinely really like that for this character, where Hope is such a funky AI unit. He's got some healing capabilities that I know, like, he's not a support. He's an offensive attacker. But because his accuracy is so bad, I know there's opportunities to leverage some of that healing. And I think this minus hate or minus 5 hate can help, obviously, in that role. But, man, again, I'm still really, like, crackpot theory crafting how that would work. But this is a great weapon upgrade regardless.
Definitely nice. I mean, because those cloth units don't really have a lot of means to get that area resistance. Of course, we just got the pod recently, but yeah, this is like good magic stat on there at over 200 as well. So yeah, I like this one overall.
Yeah, me too. The other one is for Lightning, where for her, she's just getting one line added here. It's the crit damage of 15 that will get removed after 2 hits received, but I'm going to go glass half full here. I'm pretty sure because it's got that extra text effect, this should stack with a Trust Stone passive of crit damage, because it's worded differently, right? So I think if you went crit damage of 10, this would still technically add another 15 for those critical hit moments. Pretty sure, right?
I think so. It's kind of inconsistent with this in terms of my testing, where it's like sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. But I think so. Again, we'll have to test it out.
I mean, fingers crossed, because if it's not, this is like kind of an irrelevant buff for the weapon.
Yeah, it's pretty minor then in that case. This weapon, kind of an interesting backstory though, this was like the original weapon that kind of ushered in this era of the unique passives for the characters on the weapon. This was like one of, if not the very first one.
Yep.
And yeah, still very powerful. I've always really liked the aim build, especially because you get the big axe stat with the axe passive, so then you can pull in a survival vest or some other gear to kind of help her survivability. So yeah, I like this one too.
I'm so glad you brought that up. That was going to be the cherry on top for me, that this is one of the few weapons where I do think the accuracy build is worth it. We've got to a place now with a lot of these +6 upgrades that they typically always upgrade like the assault build or the magic build. They don't really add much to these other like tertiary stats. And so unless you're looking at a stat that's 20 plus, that's just kind of my general ballpark. Because you have to recall that like a lot of these stats like accuracy, like crit rate, are already on Trust Stones that you'll equip anyway. That if they're not high enough, you don't really get a full benefit because the Trust Stone one gets cut in half anyway. And so like it pops off on paper but doesn't pop up practice. But 25 is certainly noteworthy.
Definitely.
Yep.
I think that the one that you actually grind from the missions isn't getting a +6, that like the PvE version that just kind of stays the same.
Yep.
Just the one that you create from the recipes gets the new version.
I agree. I think I saw that in the footnotes of the notices. So yeah, it's okay. I don't know anyone using that other than obviously PvE. But we are getting kind of randomly upgraded. The Dawn Lantern. Snow did not have a weapon for this event, so that kind of ends at the character comparison. I know for this one, this is the all elemental res of 5% for when your HP is above 60%. I mean, I love it. I know this obviously goes with Wrath most of the time, so as a tank, obviously love to see that extra all element res, but there's certainly other units where we've started to put this on, just mace-oriented units in general, that this is a best in slot weapon for many people at this point. This is a great upgrade.
Yeah, super nice for like arithmeticians or Queen Macherie as well.
Yep.
Getting a decent chunk of survivability with the area resist and now elemental resist as well. Obviously the healing power, a lot of those base units do have heal spells that they can leverage that. So yeah, I love this weapon. I use it all the time on mace units.
Me too. Two big thumbs up for this. That brings us now to the shining star of the banner, who is Fang, who is a new lightning-oriented Pierce unit, not 100 cost. She's a 90 cost unit that a lot of people have been not that excited about. I'm going to kind of put words in people's mouths and Some of that's warranted. Some of that is, just the cost tag alone. I think people get naturally underwhelmed by non 100 costs, but we've seen a fair share of units buck that trend as of late. So I don't think that's as much as the case anymore. Obviously, we'll talk through what we know about her though. What are your own first impressions on looking at Fang?
So I just wrapped up my review of her today. I gotta get it finalized and uploaded. So I took a fairly deep look at her. I think she's decent. She's okay. I don't think that I don't know if we know the full view of her yet, and maybe until we see Volk. I feel like there's going to be something designed for them to go together, obviously, because they're the core, kind of corresponding elements that's with the fire and lightning. She's got some nice utility though with the imperils, and she has like the barrier seal as well, which is super nice. She does that at a very long range too, at up to 6+ range. That buff there is probably like the best part of her kit there, like 4 turns of a bunch of stuff there, including the barrier. So
Yep.
I don't know, there's definitely some stuff to like here. I don't think that it's a bad unit by any means. I just think it's like you look at the lightning element, and we've said it's like the lightning problem. Again, with so many characters, it's like we have 3 slots to fill, and who is she booting out of the party at this point? Like, okay, maybe you could boot out, I don't know, Winter Wrath, like if you're going to go more physical. You're not booting out Elia. You're probably not booting out Astrius. I don't know. And then it's kind of the same thing with the spear group as well. Like you have Young Eld, you have Glassy, we've got Veritas, who everybody gets for free. Dialdo's in the mix there as well. Like there's a lot of good units in the spear group. So I know I won't steal your thunder, but I think that you have some thoughts there too on kind of where she fits in there.
Absolutely. And we'll probably just bump this part of the Q&A to right now where it's super topical. We were going to add on at the end here kind of like a general Pierce discussion, and it's obviously topical to Fang, so we might as well do it now. I still see the Pierce group as akin to the Strike group, where it's supposed to be just a mono oriented group, but it's very different depending upon the characters that you put in. Obviously, there's certain characters like Brad Elia who are just gangbusters, and they're in every single party. I don't know if Pierce has that unit. I think Eld is that unit personally. I think most people think it's Flagbearer Glaciella, but I've even seen her show her age occasionally here now with some of the unit res stuff, and her agility kind of taps out, at a certain spot. And we've been very reliant on certain things like the Bradley TMR for her, and there's so much haste to spell now that that's kind of like a part of her build that is being phased out. So I'm not saying that Pierce is like Strike. It's certainly inferior in my opinion, but I think that it's supposed to be no Pierce team should be the same, kind of like no Strike team is exactly the same. A team with Brad Elia and Ketone and 2P is going to be totally different for you to go against than like Brad Elia, Perrine, and I don't know, Urel, like throw someone in there. It is two completely different teams that do different things. In terms of where she fits, I think my first impression was what you had mentioned with Volk, where being a fire unit, you obviously play this elemental wheel where you say, okay, if Volk is amazing and counters Aldoa, the tank, a little bit, I'm not saying he does, but let's say he does. Well, okay, then people are going to bring water. Well, good. Now we have Fang, who you can bring in there to kind of like play that chess match of countering. I think she personally does best with Young Eld, just because of the seal barrier break, where that's a big part of his survivability as well. That's kind of where I see a lot of these units. If I'm looking for where their utility is, and sure, a lot of the utility tends to be selfish in terms of, all right, well, if I'm a re-raise unit, then I can seal re-raise, that helps me. But optimally, that should help your whole team. It shouldn't help Helena and Vivi and Dario and Raph, if you know what I mean. It shouldn't just be one person. So for me, for Fang, I'm looking at what units are very heavily shield oriented, and Eld obviously comes to mind as one. She's the other. I think Volk has one on his sub job, if I was recalling off the top of my head with the Grimoire, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, we just don't know the full depth of skills that he's going to get yet, but he potentially could have the HP barrier from Grimoire Keeper. So
Yeah, but
another thing that just to kind of piggyback on your point of the spear group, another thing that I was thinking about with Fang is the connection to the devout group. We know that's a very strong connection for spear, and obviously Soul is in there. So he's got that big HP barrier as well that she could help him protect. And obviously they also are playing that fire lightning sort of elemental wheel game. So
good
I
point.
think that's another nice pairing potentially as well.
That's a really good one. I'm really glad you brought that up. I'm just not sold on this unit, particularly because it's the kind of thing that I just need to play with to see if the stats matter. A lot of these Pierce units have not wowed us with their damage. They've typically needed some kind of additional imperil. She has one a little bit here with the Pierce res down of 25, but we've seen enough Pierce imperils. It still doesn't like nuke people, and I use that adjective because I know when we think of Bridal Elia, we typically use that adjective. Like she'll nuke teams, just evaporate them, and I don't think Pierce has done that, which is why I call them inferior. Obviously, not even considering the CT down effect and the haste shenanigans and the lightning imperils and snap. But I think there's enough here that I think people are sleeping on her a little bit. I see her as a valuable Pierce unit. I don't think she's a must pull. I think most people can skip, but then again, she's one of the few like lightning Pierce oriented units. We really don't have any of them other than 9S. So being a physical, I'm being a limited unit. You're gonna miss out in the future. I think Volk will change my opinion a little bit once we know more about him as well.
Yeah, I agree that this is not a must pull by any means. Like she hasn't really lit up anything over in JP at all. Like she hasn't gotten a significant play over there. And then obviously Oldoa came out, and she's a very anti-physical tank in the meta there. So physical units aren't being played quite as much into that matchup anyway. But I think that if you're a big spear player, this is obviously going to be a nice tool for the tool belt. I do like the addition of High Dragoon into her kit as well, because it does have that additional 15% apparel like Gernsback has as well.
Yep.
So that's a nice party buff that you can potentially work into the rotation. Yeah, I don't know. I might take like a flyer on her and throw some pulls at her, but I'm not. I don't have any illusions about her kind of coming in and stomping on the meta like 2P did. So
No, totally agreed. I'm a little let down. I was at least hoping for a slightly more of a potential PVE angle. That I know, when we talk about units that can contribute, Lightning is one of the most fully stacked teams that have kind of been min maxed already. And I was only saying that from the perspective of this sub job, that I actually thought this is very interesting that, unless it's a mistranslation, this is decreased chain resistance, not elemental chain resistance. And again, it could be a typo, but that would be very rare, I think. I don't think there's much chain resistance in Peril for when you say like a mono pierce team and stacking up a Glaciella triple hit and then an old double hit and then this, you know what I mean? Like, I'm intrigued. I kind of had the PvE angle in the back of my head thinking maybe you slow an enemy, decrease their chain res, but there's really nothing else here in the kit that I think really lends itself to PVE content in terms of like steal heart or steal time or CT down, other than the slow effect here. But yeah,
I mean, you could bring in the gift like no other card on her and give her chaining from that. But yeah, that's about it. I'm also disappointed that there isn't any like multi hits for her. I wish that they would implement that on more units, to be honest.
particularly if they're going to start handing out a lot of these buffs and apparels as of late in terms of the vision cards, where now you're seeing increase of elemental chain res, and obviously like debuffs here. VV notoriously has like a debuff of it too. Not that I want lots of chaining, because that also can kind of get out of hand sometimes, but sometimes that's the best way to amplify the damage. I know Strike is like one of those teams right now that's really living large off their chaining of the, at least
Yeah.
the strike type damage. I would have liked Pierce to kind of follow suit.
The Win team is another good example there too.
Excellent
Anybody's
example.
been playing around with Dario and the two spear units, they get some rip off some crazy chains.
Yeah, absolutely nuke her. And so yeah, I'm the same. I'll probably throw a couple pulls at her. My Viz dash is in a half decent spot at the moment, but I'm at this point also more prioritizing vision cards, and hers being a limited one. We'll obviously discuss that next week, where hers is not coming out this week. It's coming out the week after. That I'm trying to allocate money for that, or Viz for that. I said money slip, Freudian slip. But also for Oldoa in the future. Oldoa is like the next gangbusters unit, and if you want to buy up some shards in the shop for her, like I'm obviously trying to be cognizant of that too.
We do have the global fourth year anniversary as well. That should be here in less than a month,
Yep.
and most of us think that the new Joom unit will be unveiled at that anniversary. So Yeah, there's definitely a couple of big time units potentially that it's hard to take a flyer on some of these more fringe units right now. But one thing before we actually move on, I do want to touch on her TMR real quick because I do think this has a nice unique effect here where similar to like Zidane's debuff on his AoE attack, this one will stop CT up. It will add that imbue your attacks with that same debuff so that your enemies can't get that CT up. And obviously that's kind of a thing right now with Katone and that strike team. They like to use that, so
Yep.
it'd be
Yep.
interesting.
I like it. I wish this was, if only slightly different from the buffing angle perspective, either for the height or the size, or at least another attribute that maybe wouldn't make it repeat. I know these are great effects, but I know these get difficult to put in autoplay, and from a priority
Yeah.
standpoint, rebuffing, and it's got two casts. It's great, but if you use both, then we're in a period where you can't be throwing away buffs, so this makes it a difficult one. But it's a good one. I do like this too.
Yeah. Certainly unique.
Yeah, and then we have Fang's weapon. Obviously, this is part of it too. Not a deep dive, if you will, but hers is getting the 15% chance, 15% damage increase when her HP is less than 20%. I'll be honest, I don't like that at all. The accuracy 15, initial AP of 20 is okay. I'm not wowed by this weapon personally.
Yeah, so that first one there, it's kind of the yin to the yang with one of her passives, where she gets a 15% physical damage increase if she is above 80% HP. So she'll kind of have that at the beginning of the fight and or however long her barrier lasts. I'm not a huge fan of that passive though, to be
No,
honest, just because
no,
it is conditional and it only has those two effects. Like I think in most cases you're going to use that agility and the defense pen for most builds, I think. Or
almost
maybe you
always.
might, yeah,
Or the move one. All three of
right.
these I would use way more often than this one. Um,
So the weapon I think is a little bit disappointing, especially when you compare it to Lightning's weapon. I don't like the conditional passive there whatsoever. The other stuff is pretty nice though. Like she gets the initial AP, which is nice. I think she'll have pretty good AP management. She has the accuracy there too, so I do like the aim build on this one as well. So yeah, I think it's a decent one.
yeah, I mean, just to me, 20%. We just talked about that with snow. The odds of you falling perfectly there means that either you just randomly happen to take enough damage that you didn't die, or someone brought you to courage and you're at 1 HP. And if that's the case, well, A, you're hoping that they didn't have courage remove, which is more rare than ever nowadays. Particularly because
Or a follow-up
or
attack.
follow up attack. I was just gonna say the follow up attack meta has made courage even worse than re-raise. But yeah, I just don't like relying on that. And 15%'s fine, but I don't know. Yeah,
She does have access to courage. That's like her other
right.
party or her other self buff. So I see what they're doing with it, but I'm not a huge fan of these like super niche like conditional passives. So
Right.
can't
Well,
really rely on it too much.
I remember what I was going to say. If you think of the amount of time, the uptime, that's what I really look for. Because at this point, it's become almost impossible to really analyze some of these because the condition changes every single point of the match. So to me, I think of like, all right, in an average match, how long is this effect going to be active? And to me, Fang being below 20% HP is like one turn, like minuscule amount of time that this is actually going to happen. And just for an example of the opposite end of this, hopes that when you're below 80%, like the odds of that are near immediate and it's going to last for a while. So like that uptime for me, even the HP above 50%, like it's more active than not. And I tend to think of those more strongly than some of these super niche ones for smaller periods of time.
Yeah, 100% agreed.
But that brings us to a conversation here on the meta shift, which is very interesting. It's looking at Helena usage, particularly across the top 25, which, for quite some time, we've seen Helena start to dip, not be gone, but at least dip in top 10. And actually, we'll kind of highlight that here. Top 10, Helena is fallen rather decently. You can see her more toward this bottom here. Top 25 was a little more of a lagging, though, for a while. Between ranks 10 and 25, people were still seeing a fair bit of her. It's trending downward though, and although I only picked a 2 week sample size, I think overall the point is that you're going from a pick rate of 46% of the time down to 34%. So you're going near half the time to down to a third of the time. I would say that's significant enough. What do you think about that?
It's good. I think it's good for the meta to spread out a little bit and get a little bit more varied. The pick rate of that Black Mage team, like across the game, was very unhealthy. I would say it was there for a couple of months that they were well above that, even that 50% they were seeing there at the beginning of March.
Right.
Like in January, if we go back to like mid to late January, it was still heavy up into like the 70%.
Yeah, 67%.
I think that Helena has taken a drop off, but she still has a place in those mono light teams. I think that the biggest casualty has been Vivi and Raf. I think they have had much more of a drop off in the top end of play. Um, and that we expected that to happen. You know, I think some of these other characters like A2 coming in, 2P kind of ushering in more of a physical meta. I think that we will see some of those units come back with Oldua. Obviously, they have really good synergy with her, and she protects those units versus the physical attacks very well. So it's kind of maybe a calm before a storm here.
I would agree. I do think that a lot of this is likely tied to some of the 2P usage too, where I know we've said this from the beginning. One of Vivi's big downsides, and obviously Raph is included in that, is any kind of evasion whatsoever. And for a while, we were seeing like Halloween Lucio be the guy to kind of drive a lot of that. We saw some, niche Zidane and whatever evade teams there. We obviously have seen enough like wind evade or light evasion or and that light evade team is not top tier evade, but it's enough that characters like Vivi can still whiff. That I think 2P coming in this and adding that extra dimension of evasion has made it more difficult for Vivi and Raph to get the full upside of what they're doing. But yeah, I also think the game balance has changed too, where most units are coming out at like that 35% magic res, so the imperil isn't nearly as debilitating as it used to be. The influx of physical oriented characters has made the reflect limit break not as harsh. Where for a while there we were seeing a lot of mages still being used, and that reflect like almost single handedly shuts down any other mage because they'll virtually kill themselves after attacking her. That I think the uptick of 2P and A2 and some of these other units, Astraeus of the past, is still going strong. That Helena and is not oppressive like it was.
The other wrinkle I would add in there is the recent trend of very fast units, units that can get from anywhere from 115 to 125 agility. A2 and 2P obviously are two in there, but Zidane was another one. Actually, Fang is one who can get up there as well. She can get up pretty high with her agility passive. So Katone, obviously, yeah, she can get right up to around 120, and obviously has all those CT moves and the haste. So that is one of Helena's weaker points is her agility. Like she can get to a decent level, but most of the time, she's kind of hovering around that 110 area. So that 10 to 15 agility over the course of a few turns can make a difference.
It definitely can. I'm glad you pointed that out. That was a trend for a while where we saw a lot of these newer units come out in that 110 range that you mentioned, where for a long time we were seeing units hit that 120 mark, and we are seeing them again. Definitely a big part of it. So we're going to shift here a little bit to some like content related updates. We're getting Quick Pick returning here, and Cave 2 is the map, and the map effects are physical damage being reduced the larger the AoE size and nullification of Quicken. I like this one. I don't love this one. It just means that unit attacks obviously get more preferential treatment, which is strike again, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But I love Quick Pick personally. I love this game mode.
I like it too. I'm kind of like whatever about the quicken nullify too. Like it's so rarely ever used in autoplay, like other than like some niche teams or niche plays that rule is very like a non-factor essentially.
Yep. Yep.
Kind of a interesting map though here where it's got this raised platform in the middle and kind of the deep kind of ravines on to the sides.
Yeah.
Is this okay? I remember this map. This is the one kind of when Jade and the Celebrated first came out, right? This is that the one I'm thinking of? Kind of with
Yes.
the platform in the middle.
I think it is. Now that you mention it, we had a lot of fun with this map with Jaden Celebrated. This was his peak, quite honestly.
Yeah, this was a good map for him actually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love this map. I do like maps that tend to have that central choke point because it just allows for some more consistent fights. You don't have to worry about like weird directional movement. Obviously, seeing the height differences, that does tend to favor a lot of these mage teams too, and so that might be part of it. But um, I have high hopes that this map should yield for some interesting combos. I just like quick pick because I think it's a lot of fun to play the mind games of like which three do you pick? What's your backup team? Are you going mono element? Are you going like counter element? Are you going job based? I think there's so many different ways to play that matchup. Obviously, it's still RNG at the end of the day that you have to hopefully pick the right team and predict what they were picking. But I think it adds an element of forgiveness that like in Guild Wars you're like, well, I'm just, or Arena, you're like, no, that's a bad example too. Free match, I guess, would be a good one. Where like I'm just stuck with whatever the randomness was of what their team is. This gives you some agency and like picking a different team.
Yeah, there's that whole kind of mind game aspect too, where you're thinking, okay, I think they're gonna think that I'm gonna pick this one, so I'm gonna pick the other one, and then maybe you end up like psyching yourself out there, and end up making the wrong pick. I know I've done that a few times.
Yeah.
I was gonna say though that I think that dragoons type units have an interesting kind of niche on this map too, with the 3 or 4 jump, where they can kind of go straight up the middle and don't have to kind of take the stairway up there.
Yep.
So that's another interesting play you can use.
Yep.
Yeah, should be fun. I always like quick pick too.
Yeah. Me too. Me too. And
Nice
then
change up.
it's a great change up. In addition to that, we have the limited Guild War returning where we'll bring up the map for this too. This is going to be I believe this is what Ancient Ruins 14, as you mentioned. That limited Guild War right now, the cost is going to be primary vision cards, 190. I'm a little confused by this, but I'll let you recap it if you know it off the top of your head a little bit better.
Yeah, so it's an interesting rule set. It's based around the vision cards only, so there's no unit cost restrictions. So it's essentially promoting the job cards because they a full set, there's 60 each. So you can fit 3 full cost job cards in that 190. Technically you could do 2 job cards and then 1 regular UR 70 cost, and that would still work as well. But then it's the same thing for your sub VCs. You have 140 cost there. I think that normal UR cards are 45, so you should be able to fit any like Elder Awakened card, regardless. I think that should work in your secondary, as long as they're not um, Dark Esper. I think they'll definitely cost more.
That's true. That's true. I mean, I don't hate that. I obviously we're at the point now where we're often doing job based stuff anyway, but for a cost limited structure, this is I wouldn't really call it that. Just because unit cost is really the one that everyone looks at the most because that's the most deterministic thing about a lot of these fights. But this map's kind of the opposite of the last one in terms of like choke points where this one does kind of have like a high side and a low side of where you might walk to. There are some like odd uh, topographies here where you're getting into the height 4 and height 5 toward the middle to sort of like keep people locked in to the middle there at this very low 1 range. But again, very interesting path that if you were to really map this out, and like I do the color coded version, you can obviously tell that like it very hard funnels you top or very hard funnels you down at the bottom. I'm intrigued to see this one play out.
And wouldn't you know it, it's another lightning bonus for limited Guild War this month.
Woo!
20% HP for Fang and the lightning element.
I do think we're getting a Pierce one too, though.
There is. Yeah.
So Spear's getting Pierce attack up, and attack and healing power.
Right.
Huge, actually huge. Like Spear teams tend to like all of that, obviously.
Yeah, great for young Eld with his Lion Drain and that stuff. I was gonna say that obviously like the strike team has been one of the kings of the meta at the moment, so that same team with this cost structure just slides right in here, and you can pretty much just play the same thing. So that's a little bit disappointing, I think, because usually you look forward to limited kind of switching things up a little bit, and especially there with the lightning units getting the bonus. I can't see anything other than strike really kind of being the top team this time around.
I would agree with that. One thing I will be intrigued to look at. We do this every single time a map turns over. We're always disappointed. Is throwing a couple missile units in here to see. The big thing for here for me is that you start off on the high ground. That I'm intrigued to see that as enemies start to go down into these like slot one or height 1 and 2 areas, that if you have archer units that are still on the height 3, or dare I say even like just walk forward onto this height 4, I am intrigued, but I don't think this map is quite long enough. 14 squares is a pretty good length, but Brett Elia tank hits you from far away. I don't know if it's going to be enough.
The nice thing, yeah, actually, I was gonna say like there's the height one. If you're staying on the height 3, she can still hit you because it's stupid Stag's impact has the height range too.
Yeah, yeah.
I was gonna say maybe you could pull some funky play where you use the bow tie and the reduced movement, so they're just at one movement and kind of stay up there on the perch.
Yep.
Um,
And again, it doesn't need to be triple missile. It just needs to be like one. You know what I mean? Like, it just needs to be one that does the job appropriately. But then again, if you're being incentivized to use triple job VCs, that obviously makes it more difficult. So at this point, I think we're just shooting a dead horse with a shotgun.
Definitely.
But either way, new map. I like new maps.
Yeah, looking forward to this one.
We also have the arena and free match medal increase coming, where that's getting a ×5. And is the free match technically more than ×5? I feel like last one was jacked way higher than that.
Well, I'm gonna keep beating the dead horse, and Justin, if I don't know if you listen anymore, but if you do, please remind the team that we're well overdue just to have free match ×5 as the standard. Like we get 10 medals as like the base win, I think, for your daily free match. Whereas if you do that same thing in JP, they get 50. And like in JP, if they have the ×5 events, that becomes 250, where it becomes 50 for us. So like we're just way behind on the medal accrual there. So yeah, we did just have that 24 times events like a few weeks ago, and that was like
great. That was awesome.
That was glorious. So ×5 doesn't feel quite as good.
No, free match is one of my favorite modes in the game, to be honest, because I like the initial positioning component of it. That I still play it on auto personally. I know a lot of people do free match for manual, but I just like it for the fact that you can get creative with your initial positioning and still do auto. It rewards you for doing these interesting buff rotations that you might be limited to. We bring up units. I know like Faris is notoriously one that will just run around a double buff. Wing Stern is the same unit that he'll often just double buff units if you don't have that down right. And a lot of the initial positioning can get rid of that weakness of a lot of those characters, and it makes them hit ceilings they can't otherwise in other auto PvP modes, like both Arena and Guild Wars, which are the two most popular PvP modes. So I love free match from that strategic angle.
Yeah, same. Always loved it.
For sure. But we're going into the Spire port now, looking ahead here to Volke, who was announced, who is a 70 cost fire spear oriented unit, likely going to be the 6k paid, like many of the other units are. We do have some notes on him in terms of what his has been translated so far. So we'll look at least the rough translation of what we have from KT7 up. There we go. I don't know this by heart yet. I've not done a lot of analysis on it, but obviously things tend to start off with the limit break here. It's 3 turns of pierce resistance up, which seems odd to me. It's a select 2. It's magic based damage. Big thing to throw out there. He's a magic scaling spear unit. Very cool to see that, obviously. Regen for 3 turns. This limit break seems very odd to me at first glance. I don't know if it's a translation issue maybe, but like, I don't love this one.
I want to say that it's pierce res penetration up.
I thought so too.
And it might be an aura or something like that. Or
yeah.
Maybe it goes to the teammates. I don't know. We'll find out more when he's released tomorrow, but I think it's something that's enabling the team there. It should be.
His self buff, interestingly enough, is the HP auto restore below 50% with re-raise and hate up. So he does have that hate component, which to date, Spear really only has Dialdo that has that innate hate. I do like this component of it. Regular Eld fans in shambles. Yes, the limit break generates hate. I did not forget about that. But he does get an aura effect too, where the allies get unit res and speared up. I love that. Unit res up is critically important right now versus the strike teams. I know we've gotten a bunch of it. It's only a matter of time until we get like unit res crush, I'm sure. But for now, yeah, keep giving me the unit res. We need it.
Definitely.
And the last one here is that cross-shaped AoE that lowers enemy defense pen and spirit pen which I still like this. I think this is slightly slept on. I don't think it's like as big of a game changer as I initially thought it could be, but it's noticeable for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on who you're hitting with the debuff and your innate, defense and spirit totals. Like if you're a unit that can stack up a bunch of those, like this was how Squall was always supposed to work, right? Is he had those super high defense totals and he had that defense debuff, I believe, somewhere in his kit
He
or
did.
maybe on his weapon or something. Um, it just really never came to fruition, unfortunately. Maybe this is the unit that can finally maybe take great use of it because he is a tank, and we have seen Glassy, kind of Summer Glassy do pretty well with that too, with her select too. So
Yep.
yeah, I have this is actually going to be another 70 cost unit, which is super interesting. He's going to have the 6K paid bundle once again. Maybe this is going to be one that maybe if you passed on the other two, maybe this is going to be one that end up being worth it because tanks tend to have a pretty long lifespan in the game in terms of being resistant to meta changes at times. So I don't know. It all depends how good he is, though. I guess we'll see pretty soon here.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued. I always like to analyze like what makes them a 70 cost compared to a different cost. We've always asked that question. How do they justify the cost of certain units in the power scaling? And typically you can look at a 70 cost unit in a variety of ways and typically nail down like, all right, where do they fall behind their 100 cost counterparts? And it's typically, off the top of my head, it's typically a penetrations. They just tend to skew smidge lower. It tends to be a little bit around agility, but that's less so the case now. Obviously, Ketone bucked that trend. But I know like dexterity and crit rate is a notorious one too, along with accuracy. All of those tend to get nerfed, relatively speaking. Him being a tank, I think it's exactly going to be it. It's going to be absolutely trash dexterity. It's going to be awful accuracy, and it's probably going to be like whatever the third one I said was. Yeah, just my
All they
guess.
really need is the HP to be good because that's really all that Dario has, and
Yeah,
he's a great tank.
yeah. Oh,
And obviously they
penetrations. That's what it was. Yeah, I'm not worried about his
yeah
penetrations.
we know that like he has Grimoire Keeper, so he'll at least have access to 40 spirit penetration if he wants to bring it in. So like I think that's a nice value add with Dario because he can do that same thing. And that has been an issue I think in on Dialdo not having access to those kind of things and kind of his damage falling off as a result against some of those higher spirit units. So yeah, I'm mildly intrigued. I think they've been on a pretty decent run with the 70 cost units, and I like this. I like the 6K paid purchase option as well. Like if you just want to eliminate the gotcha and buy a unit, I like having that option.
Me personally, I do too. For the average player, it doesn't feel great. You're missing out on a lower rarity unit, but then again, I guess hopefully it doesn't end up being that impactful. My only voice in the back of my head that I'm worried about is the 97 Faith aspect of this, where Dario came out. I've played enough with Dario that I don't think I've been burned by a bunch of status effects, and as we see, Helena Vivi kind of regress a little bit, becomes less of an issue with the that sleep cancer that was going on. But even now, there's still enough status elements, obviously between like Astra's the poison and A2 with even her limit break at that lower percent chance proc rate for a magic scaling unit that can still hit you pretty hard. And that's one thing I'll be looking out for is seeing what he has in his kit. If it's like tied to a buff, is it innately 25%? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, and, when those things do come along, you can always reduce your faith. That was one point you brought up about Dialdo and kind of adjusting that for that magic meta. Personally, I've played with Dario at 70 faith. I kind of cut the difference, kind of put him a little bit in between, and the damage has still been, okay, kind of what you expect out of that slot. So I don't know. You can always make those kind of small tweaks.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll get to the Q&A here, and I guess I apparently sneak peek one of the questions earlier, talking about the missile units here, and I think we've voiced our opinions on this before, but it's still a good topic to go over for anyone that might be listening at Gumi. In your opinion, what changes would be optimal to make gun and bow type units relevant again? New units with improved stats, maybe increased range, a dex redesign, better dedicated VCs. Just as some examples. Uh, I have an idea of where you go with this, but you want to get the ball rolling? What you think would help them?
All of the above.
Yeah, is that an option?
No, so I mean, so I think that the initial design with range units is that they had reduced defenses and even a little bit um, reduced damage at the trade-off of being, much more range than any other unit in the game could achieve. So like when the game came out, the maximum range for most physical units at that point was generally between, 4 to 5. Um, and most units were probably within that 3 to 4 range. It was rare that units would get up to 5. I think Orlando maybe was one of the first ones with his limit burst. Um, but anyway, so having that disadvantage of the defenses and damage was a nice trade-off because nobody could get to you in a reasonable amount of time. Nowadays, the range, especially on mages and even on like Fang, she could get up to like 6 range as well on some of her attacks. That is encroaching on your missile units because for one, you're already reducing their movements, just to kind of wrangle in the AI. So you have that trade-off there for them where you're forced into maybe taking that passive instead of another one that you might like accuracy or something else. But then you're losing out a bit on that range advantage, and you're still having reduced defenses and usually reduced defenses as well. So it really doesn't feel like the juice is worth the squeeze as much as it used to be. I do think that they kind of realized that a little bit finally with the new Lynx unit. I feel like her defense package was competitive, I think, with other more recent units. The utility was very competitive. So I think there was actually like a reason that you might want to, slot her in and use her. So hopefully that we'll see that trend continue.
Totally, I agree completely on the X's and O aspect. I mean, and I think at this point the damage has been done. I don't think you can go back from that until you just like wait for the next life cycle of power creep, where maybe the next power, the next Bright Elia is only a 4 range unit, and you kind of get back to the norm. Where right now, even if you like extended the maps, that would do disproportionate things to other units as well, like tanks or people that only have move of 3. Weird buff rotations. I know that's been something the game's actually gotten better with. I feel like in terms of buff rotations, but the longer the map is, the better the chance you have a teammate running backward to buff a teammate behind him, if you know what I mean, if someone's not in range yet. And to that point on like the other range aspects, that I don't think you could give like a permanent extra range to missile units, because then you open up the bait potential, which doesn't feel good either. To say like right now they on average get range of 2. Most of them can also get range of 3 additively. If you were to go range of 4 for like the new staple of units, even that would have some like not great effects. So I think they've kind of killed the X's and O's portion of it. But again, unless they in the next phase of power creep reel in the range, I think that's kind of stuck. To me at this point, I feel like you almost just throw away the role in the trash in terms of like what a stereotypical missile unit looks like, and just make them a regular DPS unit that just happens to do missile oriented damage, and just let that be one of the 5 damage types. Don't play this game of like, oh, they're like really high utility but low damage, and they have some range and some offsets with the health. Like just scrap it. Just have it be missile scaling damage. Just make them a damage dealer, and give them the tools that these other physical oriented damage dealers have, that very much disproportionately so. Slash units and Pierce units in particular are just way more brawly. Like, just let the missile units have some of that cake to eat too.
I definitely agree with that. I think aside from that, really the only thing you might be looking for is there are still like certain maps that missile units can absolutely abuse, and they come around every once in a while. The last limited Guild War one was absolutely one of those where you had the 2 banks that any sort of jump one unit was stuck trying to traverse over those, and if you used missile units, you could just blow them out of the water. They could shoot right over them, and they couldn't even reach you to do any damage. So like I said, every once in a while those maps do come along and you can kind of take advantage of those.
Yeah, but yeah, there's no other class in the game where you go, oh, depends on the map. If it's not a good map, then you can't use the unit. Like, that doesn't exist for Pierce units or slash units, and it doesn't feel good anymore for it to be missile units, considering they're already that many steps behind the others. So we got a nice paragraph here for question number 2, and the next 2 questions are based off our tier list last week, which, let me also preface this, we kind of halfway through the tier list made some dramatic changes that I don't think we'd fully discussed ahead of time. And so I think a couple of these characters either got shuffled when they shouldn't have been, or vice versa. I still don't think we're 2 letter grades off. I still think we're only 1 letter grade off, but it did cause some good conversations. The first one here is about Raegen. That the opinion here is that we might be selling him short, bumping him down. I think we put him into B tier. Oh, we put him in a B. They're talking about his weapon got a buff recently to get the extra slash res pen. His MA2, that he has a lot of staying power even without the courage buff. That he's got the self heal, he's got the chakra on the sub job. It's really just dependent on the raw bulk you put into him. Obviously, the reincarnation is a factor in that for the HP. The opinion here, I think rightfully so, is that Aldoa will be a huge tide that raises most ice units up. He's definitely A tier caliber with their protection. Howlet is better than him right now, but when Aldoa comes in, she probably wants to be your Dark Shiva primary slot user, A2, all these trickle down effects of the ice units. Um, I'll let you start off on this if you want.
I absolutely think that he's better than many of the units in the B tier. So I can see where he is coming from. At the same point, though, I think it's deserved that he's definitely a step down from the majority of units that we have in the A tier as well. I do think that he did get some nice upgrades. I like, some of the bulk that they added with the MA2. I definitely like the weapon upgrade as well. It's just like if you try to use him right now, and I have tried, I have invested into him as well. He gets abused because of his range issues, and he his agility is okay, but it's not enough that his turn will come around quick enough that he can get off that chakra. Yes, it can happen. It does happen from time to time, but it's not something that you can rely on. If you're going up against like this Strike 3.0 team, they just lap him and just he can't even get a hit off by the time that he dies. So and then if he does get the hit off, the damage isn't enough that it's going to really turn the tide at all. So I think that Aldoa will be a nice bump for him. It'll be a nice bump for ice in general, but I think that he is trending downward right now.
I completely agree with all of that. And to this person's point, when we do the tier list review when Aldoa comes out, I have no doubt Ragen's going to jump back up. In the current snapshot, though, he's got to come down for me. I same thing. Have not seen him been used well, and I'll share some slight copium here. I actually thought he was going to be a type of Bradley on his release, not the same reasons, but he was unique at the time of being able to hit the uptime of the 100 defense pen a lot easier than other units, but it was on single target oriented attacks, and even like his limit break here is a single oriented slash imperil that I don't think he has the capability to influence as much of the battlefield as some of these other units do, and it's not as crushingly devastating to get hit by these. We're seeing so much unit res currently in the game that back then a year ago, I thought there was a way to like abuse that because everyone's stacking up a bunch of AoE res. Here comes this guy that can nail you for 100 defense pen on a single target and a 38% apparel. That obviously never came to fruition. I still think it's the same problem though, and I think he's one of those units that like this buff, it's okay. It's never really done amazing. It's the kind that can repeat too, so you innately have like weird AI issues. And other than that, there really isn't like any other good buffs in this kit anywhere. So like in terms of like just what you can do like creatively with him, I don't think there's much. And even this like the ice, wind, and dark teams, like that's not the strike team. That's a whole different set of elements other than Ketone being dark. But I'm not really worried about her as the carry on that team. The same thing with like the dispel coverage. Like A2 can do that on a much larger AoE. Like this isn't a big value add, so I don't think there's really anything here that I'm really like copium for that others can't do. Like dispel haste on this AoE. A2 does that. Like I don't need Raegen. Like he's like very much inferior in almost every regard. That it's hard for me to give him an edge anywhere.
Yeah, I was literally just about to say that. Like literally every piece of utility here, A2 is doing it better. Like even the slash imperil, she does have that on her. It's not quite the same, but it's she still has a slash imperil on her limit burst. So she does it all at a longer range with better bulk and higher damage. So I don't really see what he's bringing to the table. I think that Howlett, it's not even a debate whether he is much better. He is absolutely much, much better than Raegen right now. And I think that will continue to be for a while.
Yep, totally. But yeah, obviously we will still reevaluate the tiers there. We've been trying to be pragmatic. We might even just drop or like completely change our D tier and really like be realistic about some of the grades. If we don't see a character getting used ever, just take them off, and really fine tune some of those middle tiers where we can kind of flesh them out a little more.
Yeah, that was the thing that kind of happened as we were having the discussion. We kind of, or organically threw in some other units that we hadn't really fully considered, moved them down, and that obviously has big trickle down effects that others units now also need to come down or move up, because of those that kind of domino effect. So um, we'll get it fixed up for next time.
Definitely. This one was I'm surprised you keep Amnelis in A tier and don't drop her. She's slow, she's inaccurate, she's a pure attacker that never heals teammates. Even if you turn off all of her auto or attack skills, she never uses life chain abilities, has no natural magic res pen, terrible resistance, she has terrible HP. Her auto coverage support skill is the only thing that keeps her getting instantly crushed by any DPS in her B tier and up. She needs a tank character with an aura, hopefully Devout Tank come out this year. I also agree. And then maybe she'd be worthy of a B tier. Otherwise, she's a solid C in my books, and I'm a water main. I'm gonna lean to agree on this. You know what? Amnelis was put as high as she was at the peak of the Soul meta because being a staff devout unit with Soul and what we were seeing then, the two of them were primo top of the meta units. We dropped Soul down. We probably should have dropped Amnelis down in that same regard. That I actually would agree Amnelis is likely in the B tier. I think there's some things here that are perfectly well said. I agree on the magic res pen. I actually looked at that again today. It really is non-existent. And although her main, unit in peril is on a pierce scaling ability, so obviously the magic res pen doesn't matter for that unit in peril. A lot of her others, like the select three, like the dispel, are magic oriented ones. And as the game balance has evolved, we said this earlier, people are in the 30s at minimum for their magic res. Um, yeah, her damage is bad. I think people have gotten. I still think she's one of the most difficult units in the game to use because I think people try too hard to make her an accurate unit when they shouldn't. I think she should be a purely inaccurate unit. That if you run up on any kind of evade, she opts into her teammate heal back buff, or she opts into the arithmetician heal or the arithmetician disable. I think too many people tried to stress test that accuracy, and the AI didn't like that, and results are subpar. So I think there's kind of like a user component in that too. But man, it's hard to disagree with the rest of this. There's a lot of good points here.
I agree. This unit should have moved down to B tier. I think C tier is way too harsh though. This is definitely at least a B unit. And then like the MA2 definitely gave her some nice bumps. I disagree with a few things here though. Magic resist pen, that's absolutely true. She doesn't have any.
Yep.
Terrible resists, I disagree. Like she has good resists other than Pierce, which is her only negative. And then she has like the big AoE resist of 25, which there's not a ton of units that get more than that as a base value, only a small handful. They did fix like her big cast time issue, which will help her, which does help her magic res penetration because she's can be more useful with her photon pulse, which is her pierce magic attack.
Right.
Almost like her very long cast time. That now gets down, I believe, to a 1 tick very easily now.
Yep.
And that sets up her ternary seal with the unit resist debuff there. So I
Oh,
don't know.
can I piggyback off that for a second?
Yeah.
That's a great point. By the nature of having a 25 unit in peril, that's virtually on the follow up of the triple hit a type of magic res pen. You can think of it as kind of the same idea. If someone had magic res pen of 25%, no, whatever the number is, like this does still set up further damage. I kind of forgot that angle. That implicitly you don't need the magic res pen by the nature of the fact that you're already debilitating them by 25% on these other attacks. So I'm sorry, that's a very well thought out point.
So I mean, so the overall point by him is well taken. Like I said, B units, and I think she did actually just get a very nice limit burst upgrade in JP that does help her out a bit too. We can take a look at that while we're here.
I mean, this shouldn't be a consideration for tier list, but for the future when we have to redo this.
completely fixes her accuracy issue, gives her a
Ooh.
guarantee. This is like the 2P buff, guaranteed hit for 3 turns, and then gives her some cast time up. So pretty damn nice, I'd say. But
That
yeah, she absolutely will move down to B next time.
that solves a lot of the AI problems I was just talking about. If you can just guarantee hit for 3 turns, there you go.
Yeah, screw the accuracy, let her use the limit burst, and she's good to go.
Yep. Yep. Good stuff. Next question here, and last question, technically. I love that y'all have stuck to a more analytical style of content, but still sprinkling these type of old school fun content like the waifu tier list. Do we have anything else that like that planned for the future? Was thinking of a year two style pull war that could be in our wheelhouse. We've thought of a couple of these fun events. I don't. Any come to mind still for you? I know we have a couple in the bag.
I think that a pull war is a great idea. I think that would be something fun to do on the podcast. The issue is, can we sort of wait long enough to not pull that morning to do it on camera? Which I'm not sure if we have the self control to do that, but we could always throw on the camera early on in the morning, film it, and then just kind of add it in ad hoc. So I think that's a good idea. We are going to do another round of the Smasher Pass, like we had already kind of teased that for the first one. We do have like the 50th episode kind of extravaganza that we've started planning. That'll be coming up in a few less than a month at this point. I think, what is this, 47 for
Yeah.
us now?
Yep.
So yeah, if you guys have any ideas or kind of fun ideas that you'd like to see us do, throw them in the comments, and yeah, we'll consider it.
Yeah, definitely. I know the pull war. This sounds. I need to think this one through. I've actually thought about this before. I don't know if I like doing pull related stuff on my channel. If you ever look at my videos, I've never done any kind of pull content. There's just something about it. I don't want to call it the gambling aspect of it, but I this game can be debilitating to people that don't have like the right kind of self control, and I don't want to start creating content that might lead to people engaging in more of it if they start getting addicted to like pull kind of stuff. I know, I don't know if it makes a lot of sense, but I just know for me intuitively, like I don't know if either a people might like live vicariously through me, and so that solves the itch, or maybe it's the kind of thing that's like, oh man, like Will got her on the second pull, maybe I can get her on the second pull, and all of a sudden they don't, and they pity and they screw up their vids. That like there's just some component of that I don't like being a leader for, if you know what I'm saying.
I can definitely see that. I've never, I mean, I've done some live stream stuff where I've done polls and stuff like that. I can definitely see that angle. I can 100% vouch for the fact that I have watched, you know, uh, Dr. Diggs or on Jay back in the day do their polls and then said, "Oh man, I got to get." I did pity the unit, so
Yeah.
100% can see that happening.
Yep.
But yeah, I think it is fun for people too.
Yeah. Not that I disagree with it. I just know that for me personally, it's not like my thing that I want to like endorse if I can help it. But shoot,
Yeah.
maybe like on a one off, like for you and me on the podcast, like we can make it happen. Maybe we'll just pick some like low B thing. Then again, we buy so often and like roll so often, dude. I don't even know if I have like the Viz stash for a pull war. Like we'd have to do some special purchasing ahead of time to like
Oh man.
get ready for that.
The other thing is, like, we've talked about, like, we both live really close together, like in real life, which is super random.
Yep.
So, and we still haven't met to this point. So we've talked about maybe doing like an in-person version of this as well. So something that we'll get to eventually.
Most definitely. Yeah. So we've got a bunch of ideas, but if anyone has anything really purposely that you want to contribute, we're all ears and would love to do it. We like having fun with a lot of this stuff. We tend to use the analytical and like report side of it because we don't typically do that kind of content on our own. Like we don't really do like limit break upgrade analyses, or I know a lot of times like Orange will like read the news when it comes out for the week, and we hadn't. This is kind of like our way to 2-in-1: read the news while also giving some analysis while also covering some other things. And so it doesn't have to be that formula. We've wanted to branch out, but yeah, suggestions appreciated. So I think that's all we got for today. It's basically just a big Final Fantasy 13 fest. Yeah, I'm excited to do the Fang review because I do need to really like think through a little bit more. We'll see if I end up pulling for it, but I'll enjoy my Hope Copium for now and see if I can do anything with them in the meantime.
I do know that at least over in JP, I was checking the shops because the Final Fantasy 13 is still live over there, and all of the old units get 80 shards for Gil. So you can, if you have all three of the old units already built, you can get 240 Mind Spheres for Gil right off the bat, which is pretty nice. Just like they did with the near stuff. So I like seeing that on these reruns.
Me too. If only for like the 140 alone. Obviously, still like cost the antlers, but if you had in 140 Hope or Lightning or Snow, a quick 240 Mind Spheres would certainly go a long way for two of those three characters. Just right there for free.
Definitely.
Yep. But yeah, that's all we got for now. We'll see what happens this week with the Fang pulls. But thanks for watching, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
See you next time.